All right, welcome back, Shh. Good. All right, everyone doing well? Yes, yeah. Okay, awesome. There's good news and there's bad news, okay? So the good news is today's the last topic on future interests. The bad news is the worst one yet. So I will open this by giving you some consolation, which you should have already read in the syllabus, okay? Everything we cover today will not be an exam. All right, so here's my promise to you. The topic for today, as I'm sure you're well aware now, is called the rule against perpetuities. It's this rule that really doesn't make much sense, makes things really complicated, okay? And requires levels of abstraction that are so far removed from what I want you to learn, I don't even want to waste your time with on the exam. So here's my offer, right? I'm going to teach it to you. We'll spend an entire class on it today. You can ask me whatever questions you want. I won't test you on it, okay? It will be on the bar, so you will need to know it in about 2 years. It'll be much better if you know it now and you're learning it, rather than learning it firsthand. I'll tell you the questions in the bar are significantly easier than anything I would ask. So that's the deal, okay? I put this very clearly. On the exam, if your answer is rule against perpetuities, it's wrong. Okay, I can't say that more clearly. On the exam, if you think the answer is rule against perpetuities, you're wrong. So don't put that. Every year, like 1 or 2 people put that, and they're wrong. All of the interests which I put in the exam will be valid under RAP. So the answer will not be this is void under rule against perpetuities. Good, everyone comprende? All right, so my goal for today is to walk you through the rule against perpetuities and its history and do a number of examples. Again, if you have questions, feel free to stop me. But if you're confused, it's okay. There's actually a huge debate within professors whether you actually teach this topic. My professor never taught it to me. I never actually learned it in law school. I think you probably have the right idea. The reason why is to actually truly get through against perpetuities will take probably 2 or 3 classes. If I really wanted you to get it well, like the amount of time I put in executory interest, I would put that into rule against perpetuities. That would not be a good use of class time. We have much more important other things to cover. So I structure it like this, okay? All right, so any questions before we get started? All right, so at the outset, right, this entire topic, if you think about it, was about a battle, okay? You had these very wealthy landowners who are trying to control who gets land long after that person's dead, right? So if I'm a wealthy landowner and I have a son that I don't really like, but I'm excited that my son might have grandchildren one day, I'm going to try and take various steps to cut my son out of the loop, okay? And that way my grandkids, who maybe I know, maybe I don't, maybe they're still minors and minors can't really inherit property yet, right? Maybe my minors will be okay. But what ended up happening was that the courts didn't like these conveyances, right? They didn't like land to be tied up with all these contingencies, where if this happens or if this person survives that person, right? So you had all these various rules that were developed to try to prevent people from leaving land to those who are not yet even born yet, right? The general gist was you can leave land to people who are alive or that you at least know of, but don't start leaving land to people who haven't been born yet. It makes the vesting, or when it comes together, too far in the future, becomes too remote. Okay? So everything we do today is premised on the idea of how the courts were trying to eliminate these contingent remainders that might happen in the future. Okay? And a couple of you have actually very presciently asked me questions about this, like, oh, why can't you structure it like this, or why can't you structure it like that, right? To A for life and to A's heirs. And I told you, don't ask me about that yet. Today is when we're actually going to get to that, right? Yeah, I'll sign a book. That's fine. I don't charge for that. Okay. So before we get started, I want you to show you a face. So any hatred you have for the rule against perpetuities direct to Sir Orlando Bridgman, it's his fault. This guy made up all these crazy conveyances, which we forced the courts to make up this rule. So don't hate me. Hate this guy. It looks very odious, right? Okay. So let's walk through a number of the different rules that are that were in existence. Okay, and I want to make one point very clear. I'm about to teach about 3 rules. Okay, these are all rules that are aimed at destroying contingent remainders. Contingent remainders. By now, you should know for sure the difference between a vested remainder and a contingent remainder. Right? You should know that cold. Generally speaking, when you have a life estate, right, followed by a remainder, and there's some sort of condition precedent there, that remainder is contingent. Okay? If there's no condition precedent and the person's ascertained, it's a vested remainder. Vested remainders are not subject to the rule against perpetuities or any of these rules because they're vested. They are certain to happen. All these rules are aimed at contingent remainders of different types. Okay? We're good with that? Okay. So the first rule, I'll probably do a little bit more lecturing today than otherwise because it's not as intuitive. The first rule is what's called the destructibility of contingent remainders. And it does exactly that. For a long time, any remainder that was contingent, basically on the death of the life estate, right? So at the end of the life estate, if there's still some remainder that's contingent, it was destroyed, right? Examples are much easier than words. So let's look at this example. It says, O conveys Blackacre to A for life, okay? Then to B and her heirs if B reaches 21. Okay? We know that this one's easy, right? A has a life estate, okay? And following the life estate, you have a remainder, okay? What kind of remainder it is, right? Well, there is a condition precedent there that B, that the heirs, I'm sorry, if B reaches 21, right? That's the condition precedent. We know then that's a contingent remainder. Okay? So what happens if B reaches 21 before A's death? Okay? Then at A's death, everything goes according to plan and it transfers from A to B. Right? There's no dispute. If B reaches 21, you know, very early on, once A dies, there's a continuity. Okay? What happens if B is not yet 21? There's going to be this gap where A's dead, B's not yet 21, right? So there's actually reversion to O. Okay? So we know there's reversion to O. But something else is actually going on, which you may not have appreciated. We actually destroy B's remainder. We're actually the heirs of B's remainder. Earlier, we simply said, oh yeah, when A dies, and B is not yet 21, there's reversion to O, which we get. What happened to B's and his heirs' future interests, right? The answer is that it's destroyed. It's eliminated, okay? Under the common law, whenever you had this kind of gap between the conclusion of the life estate and when it's supposed to go to the remainder man, the remainder was just destroyed, vanquished, and it reverted back to the reversion back to O.
Isn't that the same with any remainder? If that condition isn't met, then they don't get it.
Effectively, that's what happens. But you actually had the interest being struck out, right? Under the common law, we wouldn't wait and see. It would actually invalidate it in its entirety. You see the difference, right? Because at the time when this is granted, right, we don't know how long B will live for. They would actually strike out the remainder in advance, and O would have reversion right away. It's as if you simply had deleted this clause from the sentence. So this is what makes this entire topic difficult.
Oh, I see.
When I say we strike out an interest, we have to effectively pretend that that's not there. They actually lose the interest altogether.
So that's different than if it said to B and her heirs if B reaches 21 by the time A got.
This rule has been abolished. So when we've been studying all along, I haven't mentioned this, right? But while this rule was in effect, this conveyance, right, the remainder is actually destroyed. It's as if you kind of just cross it out of the sentence. All right, let's take a look at the next page. Example 26, right? Okay, so this says, O conveys white acres to A for life, then to B and her heirs if B survives A. Now, under the modern rule, we've done this question a couple of times, right? Under the modern rule, we say A is a life estate, B has a remainder. Because there's a conditional precedent, this is what we call a contingent remainder, right? There's no dispute about that, okay? But now let's go back to the common law. What it says in the next sentence is that A conveys his life estate to O, okay? This is what's called the doctrine of merger. Okay, what do I mean by the doctrine of merger? Think in terms of your bundle of sticks, right? O would have some sort of reversion, right? Because you struck out the contingent remainder. When you merge the life estate with the reversion, O effectively has it now. Okay? What's difficult about this part is this clause, right? Under the destructibility of contingent remainders, it's as if it was deleted. So it's effectively O conveys white acre to A for life. That's all you actually have. And then when A has a life estate and O has reversion, and then both those interests come to the same person, they merge to actually make a fee simple. This doctrine of merger is a little bit counterintuitive, but if there's a reversion and a life estate, and they merge, that now becomes fee simple. Okay? So by making this transfer, O is effectively destroying, A is effectively destroying the future interest. Okay? Again, I don't want you to get too hung up on these because this rule has been abolished for a few hundred years, okay? I want you to at least understand how it works and how this informs the backdrop of why these conveyances are complicated. Okay? All right, so that's the doctrine of merger. All right. The next rule, which has also been destroyed, or I guess eliminated, is what was called the rule in Shelley's case. And I'm sure there's some law students who have to memorize this by heart. If you want to, you're welcome to. I haven't memorized the factors, but I can at least perhaps explain them to you. So what this is trying to prevent is this. I think someone asked me about this last week. What if O doesn't trust his son A? O doesn't like his good-for-nothing son, but he wants the land to remain in the family. Okay? So he says, all right, you know what, son, I don't trust you for anything. So you can have this the rest of your life. You get a life estate, and then when you die, it goes to your heirs. What's actually happening here is that O is trying to cut his son A out of the picture. Everyone see like what the intent is, what they're trying to do. So when you have a single instrument that creates a life estate in A, that's son, and then gives the remainders to the heirs of A, right? When you try to give a life estate followed by a remainder in the heirs of that life estate, okay, the rule of Shelley's case applies. And this effectively gives A vested remainder in fee simple. Okay? What is happening is A's life estate merges with the remainder. A gets fee simple. Let me say that again. If you just look at this one to start, in example 27, A is a life estate and his heirs have a remainder, right? And it's actually a contingent remainder because we don't know who his A's heirs are until A dies. So what the rule in Shelley's case is, listen, we basically give the remainder back to A. We don't want any of this A's heir stuff. So when someone holds a life estate plus the remainder, they have the entire bundle of sticks, it merges together, and A has fee simple. Okay? The goal of the rule in Shelley's case is to convert these life estates followed by remainders into a fee simple for the current owner. O can't do that. So O's attempt to screw out his son, A, is frustrated. Okay? Any questions on that one? Let's see, any other examples on that one? All right. If you can tell, again, this one has been abolished for quite some time. But these were all means to prevent wealthy landowners from basically excluding their children from inheriting, right? These were ways of getting around it. Okay, the doctrine of worthier title. Okay. And again, I'm going to give you an example because it's much easier than trying to explain this with words. So we have O conveys Blackacre to A for life, then to O's heirs. All right. So what's going on here? Well, you have O, who again doesn't like his son A. I'm sorry, O, who doesn't like his son, O's son. Okay. So what does he do? He gives it to some third party A to hold on to it. And once that third party dies, it comes back to O's heirs. Effectively, O is delaying the point at which his heirs take the land, presumably till maybe some bad son dies. Believe it or not, a lot of these have to do with sons who are mentally insane, right? I mean, they didn't have mental diagnoses back then, but if a child was deemed a lunatic, it's like, okay, how do we make sure that no one takes advantage of him and no one takes land from him? Let's push this off into the future so someone else is alive, right? Let's push this off in the future so someone else will get it and it'll stay in my bloodline, okay? So what ends up happening, right, is the court effectively strikes it out, right? Under this doctrine of worthier title, it eliminates the remainder. It strikes out this last clause, right? Then to O's heirs, strikes it out. So what ends up happening is that O has reversion. Same as before. Efforts to try to bring it back to the family after some life estate is invalidated. So this entire clause is struck out under this doctrine of worthier title. And O simply has reversion. No. The difference is here it's to O's heirs, and here it's to A's heirs.
No. I mean,
No, one at a time, okay? Go ahead.
Scroll back down really fast to it. Yeah. If you're taking out then to O's heirs, and when it ends with A.
Oh, so you're asking.
It goes back to O's.
It goes back to O.
Yeah, but.
And then O can decide who his heirs are. In other words, O's heirs aren't calculated to O's dead, right? What if O's still alive? So it goes back immediately. In other words, the second you write this conveyance under the doctrine of worthier title, you strike out the remainder. It's as if O had just said O to A for life, right?
So either way, O is getting it.
Well, no. With the reversion, O gets it. Without this, heirs get it, right? When are O's heirs determined? The difference is under this one, O never gets it back, right? As it's written here, O never gets it back. It'll go to O's heirs.
Right.
But one at a time, right? You guys, patience, right? But if it's like this, O will get it back.
I understand that. I'm just saying, it seems to me like the intent, O's intent is still basically being completed.
Not necessarily, because when O gets it back in fee simple, he can give it to whomever he wants. It's still alienable. Here, it's not alienable because that's the way for O to die. Right? When it says to O's heirs, O can no longer alienate it. When it comes back to O in fee simple, O can do whatever he wants with it. O can sell it, he can mortgage it, do whatever he wants. It's a difference of what O can do with it during his lifetime. So, other people have their hands up?
So the way it was written before, if we could do that to A for life, then to O's heirs, if A dies and O is still alive, there's a period of time where nobody owns.
Okay, no. Okay, so I'm glad you asked that. Land has to be owned by someone at any given point. Okay, land can never not be owned by anyone. So what actually would happen, and this is actually kind of weird. After A dies, right? Actually, one of two things can happen. It's actually not entirely clear, but I'll give you a couple options, right? One option is that A's heirs might hold on to it, but that's not a very good answer. More likely what will happen is that O holds on to it until he dies, and then it goes to his heirs. You see why this is a messy transaction, why the courts didn't like it, right? What happens if after A dies, O's still alive? O doesn't have any heirs yet, right? If A's alive if A dies and O's still alive, O has no heirs. So you can't give it to O's heirs yet. So land has to be held somewhere. And more likely than not, again, this gets a little murky. O would hold on to it until he dies, at which point his heirs would take it. But O wouldn't have in fee simple, though. it would effectively do this like quasi life estate, but not really.
So he's holding on to it.
But he can't sell it. He doesn't have it. But there's a big difference. He doesn't have it fee simple. That's a significant difference. He couldn't sell it. I mean, perhaps you could sell it for the remainder of his life, but he couldn't sell it in fee simple.
So just to clarify, you had said that when O gets it back in reversion under this worthier title, he doesn't have fee simple.
No. With the application of the doctrine of worthier title, right? You strike out this last clause. So it's simply just O to A for life. And that's a straight up reversion like we've done since the first week of this topic. The doctrine of worthier title strikes out the remainder. It strikes out. So it's simply O to A for life. That's it.
But when O receives it back in reverse.
Yes, fee simple.
Okay.
You kind of answered my question. It's kind of like O's giving himself a life estate after A life estate.
It's not really, but that's effectively what happens. So one of the reasons why the courts struck out these various contingent remainders is they didn't want these weird things to happen, right? We have these gaps where you have to wait for O to die, but that might not happen for a while. So that's why the doctrine of worthier title actually made some sense. You just strike out the remainder and it comes back to O, which is effectively what happens. The difference is O has it now in fee simple, rather than this weird quasi-life estate that lasts for a determinate time. It makes the land more alienable. Again, Bridgman, right? This guy's fault, not my fault. Okay. Everyone get in general the gist of these three rules. If you don't get the exact contours, that's fine because they don't exist anymore. Okay? And if you don't believe me, if you go to Texas Property Code, section 5.042, called Abolition of Common Law Rules. I think I linked to it here, so you can relish, right? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, the Abolition of Common Law Rules. Okay? Okay. The common law rules, known as the rule in Shelley's case, the rule forbidding a remainder to the grantor's heirs, a doctrine of worthier title, do not apply in this state. Hallelujah, mazel tov, right? So it's here, it's done. You can read this. I'll caveat this slightly. If for whatever reason there are any old instruments, right, that were in existence before 1964, you may come into contact with it, right? So don't party and celebrate quite yet, but no new instruments have this. These doctrines still exist in like a handful of states in various forms. In your book lists some of the states where they still exist. But again, don't worry too much about these titles. What's important to remember is one of the reasons why these were eliminated was because of the creation of the rule against perpetuities. Okay. Rather than having these three rules which kind of overlapped and did roughly the same thing or something similar, which a few of you picked up on, did more or less the same thing, we now have a single rule, which is now called the rule against perpetuities. All right? All right, so any questions before I move on? Okay. All right, so the rule against perpetuities, again, I think this is probably the hardest topic in property, which is why I don't think it's nearly worth as much. The goal at a high level of the RAP, rule against perpetuities, is to strike out contingent remainders. Okay? The goal of this is to eliminate these contingencies. That's the overarching goal. Which remainders are struck out, it becomes a very, very difficult question. So philosophically, the goal of the rule against perpetuities was to basically limit people's ability to control land into the future. It said, you know what? You can control land now during your life. You can control land based on the lives of some people you know, and maybe within a few years after those people. So the classic example is a grandfather has a son, right? And the son is a minor child. You want the minor child to inherit property. They can't do that till they're 21 years old in some places. You say, you know what? I'm going to give this property to my grandson who's 21 years old. Okay? I mean, you might not know your grandson. He's still an infant, but you at least know he's in existence. Okay, nothing wrong with that. All right? But now imagine if you're a property owner and you say, I want to leave my property not to my grandson, but to my great-grandson. Okay? My grandson is only a couple months old, but I'm sure he's going to have a kid. And I'm positive this great-grandson will be the most awesome guy ever, right? Well, you don't really know that person. It hasn't even been conceived yet. I mean, there's not even like a thought, a glimmer in anyone's mind. Okay? And we say, you know what? My great-great-grandson, you know what? Third generation is the charm. He's going to be the right one. You see the problem. You're effectively vesting property rights into these people who don't even exist, they never exist, really far into the future. So the goal of the rule against perpetuities was to limit this far out-reaching grants of land. And the way it did this was by limiting your ability to give land to those lives which are currently in being, people who are alive now, plus 21 years. Right? Give land to someone who, and I'm oversimplifying, I'll give details, to someone who isn't existing now, plus 21 more years. So if your son is alive now, and he may have a son at some point, if he has that person within 21 years, you're probably okay. All right. So the actual formulation of it, and it's been said many times, this is in your book, but I'll read it. It says, no interest is good unless it must vest, if at all, not later than 21 years after some life in being at the creation of the interest. So I'll say it again. No interest is good unless it must vest, if at all, not later than 21 years after some life in being at the creation of the interest. Okay. Texas phrases it more or less the same, but just in a little bit more complicated manner. It says, an interest is not good. Whoops, too big. An interest is not good unless it must vest, if at all, not later than 21 years after some life in being at the time of the creation of the interest, plus Texas, plus a period of gestation. And this is actually a significant part because if you are in the womb, you are a person in being, right? It's kind of an odd thought, but you can actually inherit property in utero. You may not know that. Once a person's pregnant and there's a baby in there, then you can inherit. So that's effectively treated as a full person. I'm guessing that's what the Texas gestation period is making very explicit. Okay. So how does this work? And I think the easiest way to do this is to show you an example. Let's try example 29. There it is. Okay, example 29. The goal of the rule against perpetuities is to invalidate certain types of contingent remainders. Okay? So the first thing you want to do, assuming you're trying to figure out the rule against perpetuities, is take a look at the granting language and ask yourself, are these remainders vested? Or are these remainders contingent? Okay. What will make your life more annoying is an executory interest is considered a contingent remainder. I know. They're not the same thing, and it's spent you an entire day drilling you. But if someone has an executory interest, those are considered contingent, and those can be struck under the rule against perpetuities. Vested remainders are okay. But then again, if you remember that the vested remainder is subject to open, the vested remainder is subject to divestment, all these other vested remainders that have these other conditions, those are subject to the rule against perpetuities. So the easiest way to explain it, right? The future interests which are not subject to this are vested remainders. Pure straight vested remainders are not subject to it. The other ones, contingent remainders, executory interests, vested remainders subject to open, those are all going to be subject to wrap. You see why this topic is really messy, okay? So the first step of what you want to do is you want to classify, right? Is this remainder even subject to the rule? All right, so let's walk through this example. All right, where did I finish last time? All right, thank you, sir. All right, Harrison, let's take this one sentence at a time. We'll be on this one for a few minutes. So, okay, so O transfers a sum in trust for A to life, then to A's first child to reach 21. So let's just characterize what is A's interest here? What's A's estate? Perfect, right? A is the life estate, okay? What is the future interest here? What do we call the future interest after life estate? Goods remainder. Okay. Who has this future interest?
Well, I guess nobody knows. Does he have a child yet or not?
Let's assume he doesn't.
He doesn't have a child. Well, I guess nobody would if he doesn't have a child. Well, who has the future interest right now?
Yeah.
I guess would O have the future interest since he doesn't have the
You're overthinking this, right? Is there a future interest here? You're fighting this. I know you know this. Is there a possible a chance there's a future interest here? Who would have it? Who reaches? What do we call this? Is there a condition precedent here?
No, it would be a condition subsequent.
No.
Oh, does he have to reach 21 before he gets there?
Before condition precedent. See, I knew you had this, right? So what, in theory, right? What would the What would the future interest be of A's child? Yes, right? A contingent remainder. What's disturbing to you about this is the child hasn't been born yet, right? There is no A child. This person doesn't exist yet. But A's child, in the abstract, somewhere in the ether, right, has a contingent remainder. Right? Everyone see this? Okay. The fact that he has a contingent remainder means you raise your red flags. Say, okay, wait a minute. Rule against perpetuities is applying here, okay? Okay. The next thing you do, and this is not set in stone, this is a very variable process, right? Is you have to try to strike out remainders that vest too far in the future, right? Now, I use this word vest all the time, and maybe you don't know what that means, just pretend you know what it means. Vest means the interest either succeeds or fails, right? And let me give you an example. A's child, A's firstborn child, will either reach 21 or he won't. There's no dispute, right? Any child that's born will either reach the age of 21 or won't. We don't stop aging, right? He won't hit 20 and say, oh, I'm done, guys, right? You will either reach 21 or you won't. In other words, that condition will either vest or terminate. There's no dispute. If you die on your 20th birthday, you will never reach 21. Okay, everyone see that far? All right? So we know that this is the condition that will definitely happen one way or the other. Okay? So what we have to do is we have to find something that's called a validating life. Sounds like this very Joel Osteen term, right? But a validating life, right, is what we might call a measuring life, but don't call it that. This is a life by which we measure something that happens in the future. The rule against perpetuity says life in being plus 21 years. A life in being is some life that exists today. We know this person exists. So, Jesse, in this example, right, who here is really the important person that we have to be basing our decision on? What's this person's name?
It would be the child, A's child.
Do we know who this child is yet?
No.
Does this child have a name?
Uh,
Maybe people name their unborn children, but is this child of any existence?
no.
Yeah, assume. Yeah, that's right. Who's the only person we know about here? What's the only name we know?
A.
That's right. How do we know about A's name?
He's been asking for it.
Yeah, he's named, right? This is the easy part, right? If someone has a name like A or Josh or Larry or whatever, right? This is the person we know about. So in this case, A is our focal point, right? But more importantly, right? Let's go to Andrew. Why is A so important in this case? What does A have to do, right? What's A's pivotal role in this question?
I mean, carrying out the escape, I guess.
No. What does he have to do?
Have the kid.
Have a kid. Yes. Right. In this question, in order for A's child to reach 21, A has to have a child. I know that sounds really obvious, but it's an important point to focus on. In order for the child of A to reach 21, A's got to have. There's no way around that. We don't have IVF. Please don't ask me about IVF. Don't ask me about that. Okay. We don't have IVF in medieval times. It doesn't exist, okay? There's one way of having a kid, old-fashioned way, all right? So, O transfers to A for life, then to A's first child to reach 21, okay? Aaron, let me ask you a very stupid question, but it's an important question. Can A have a child after he dies? No.
Yeah, well,
No, don't say IVF.
you can't have a child after.
Can he conceive of a child after he's dead?
No.
Okay. Everyone get that. I know it sounds stupid, but it's an important point. You can't have kids after you're dead. I guess you could fertilize a person on their deathbed, and the baby's born within 8 months, which is why the Texas one gestation period, for the moment that we're talking about a male, not a female. Females cannot give birth after they're dead. That much is certain, right? Men can at least just whatever. I don't give you a sex ed lesson, right? So, in order for A to have a child, he has to be alive, right? No one disputes that, all right? So, Jordan, if A has a child today, right, and then he dies tomorrow, right? A is a child today, gives birth, and then dies tomorrow. What is the likelihood that the child will reach 21 years within 21 years of A's death?
It's likely.
Will it happen?
I mean, it's not certain happening.
Okay, let me ask it like this. Will it either happen or not happen within 21 years?
Yes.
Yes, and this is the hard part. There's a chance the baby might die the next day, in which case he definitely won't reach that age within 21 years. Or he may live a natural life, and he will reach 21 years within that time period. What you have to see is within 21 years of the death of A, 21 years of that life and being, will this condition be satisfied or not satisfied? Right? It doesn't have to happen, but he either has to complete entirely or not at all. There is a 100% chance that within 21 years of A's death, this kid will either be 21 or won't. Right? You don't stop aging. You will either reach it or you won't. And for that reason, the rule that this contingent remainder will be valid under the rule against perpetuities. It would not be struck out. Everyone see this. This would be a valid contingent remainder under RAP because it's guaranteed to vest or not within 21 years. There's a 100% chance this will vest or not. This is what you need to ask yourself. Will this vest or not within 21 years of the life of being? We'll see in the next example a case where it may not.
Can you repeat the question? Well, question to ask again.
Right. Will it vest or not within 21 years of the life and being? Right. This is just rephrasing the explanation I gave you before.
Can we still consider A's first child as being ascertained, even though?
No, it's not ascertained. It's a contingent remainder.
Okay.
It's a contingent remainder specifically because the child's not ascertained yet. It's specifically for that reason. And there is this condition precedent, right? It's to reach the age of 21. Yes?
So I still have a version if either a child is born or
Yes. So in the event, right? In the event that the child dies on his birthday, dies on his 5th birthday, right? In which case, well, if, again, this is where it gets a little messy, right? If A is still alive, right? And his son dies, and then A has no more children, there's reversion back to O. All right? Okay? If A, again, gives birth and dies the next day, the child won't get it till he's 21. So you have this intervening 21-year period where effectively what happens, O would hold it in this quasi-holding pattern, and there's not a name for that, right? O would effectively hold it for some period of time until the kid turns 21, and then he would get it. If the kid died in the next day, then O would have reversion, in fee simple.
Will we have to state this right on a test?
No, Calvin, I told you everything we're doing today is not in the exam.
Right.
This is not. The reason why is because it makes the most simple questions overly complicated. And you see why, right? Because you have these weird intervening periods where it's unclear actually what happened. So again, I won't test you on rap. And if your answer in the exam is rap, you're wrong. And I promise you a couple of you will put that. And I'll say, good job reading commercial outlines, you're wrong. Usually that's why I know people actually didn't attend the class because they missed the part where I said this is not an exam. That's usually one of my tips. All right, let's try the other example because it's the opposite. Right, this other example gives an illustration where things don't work out so neatly. All right, Alex, you're up. Read just the example 30, please, the next page. Okay, thank you. So the only difference between 29 and 30, let's see if we can have both at the same time. No, I can't. The only difference between 29 and 30 is in the previous question, it said reach 21, which is our magic number, right? Age of majority in most places, right? Historically, at least. And this one is 25, right? And at the time of this conveyance, A has no kids, no child 25 or older. Okay? So let's try and walk through this one step at a time, Alex. What's A's estate here? Okay, good. What interest follows this life estate? What kind of remainder? Why is it contingent remainder? Good, yeah. This is a person who's not yet ascertained. He has no child who's reached 25. Actually, in this case, he has a child. I'm going to assume he has no kids, but this actually is a little bit ambiguous. Let's assume he has no kids for the moment, right? Make it a little bit easier. The child is not ascertained and is condition precedent. So now, once you see contingent remainder, you start thinking, okay, perpetuity, right? Rat. What's the issue here? So Alex, so who's the measuring from? Yes, A. Is it starting to happen that A's child will reach the age of 25 or not within 21 years? Why not? Yes. And be 3 years short. So this sentence actually is a very good explanation, so I'll read it. You can't prove that A's first child to reach 25 will do so within 21 years of A's death. And let's consider an example, right? A gives birth on January 1st, 2000, right? That child will need to turn 25 within 21 years. A dies January 1st, the child will have needed to turn 25 within 21 years. Okay, that's impossible. You can't age 25 years and 21 years. Okay? Because it's not certain to vest within that time period, what we actually end up doing is striking. You're striking out the contingent remainder. Right? So effectively what ends up happening is that O has reversion. Sorry. O has reversion. You just pretend under the rule against perpetuities that the last clause is missing. You just strike it out. Because it's not certain to vest within the time period. It's not certain to vest within 20 years of A's life, 21 years of A's life. So, and I'm again going to go to Calvin's question. On an exam, imagine after you figure out, okay, life estate, contingent remainder, then add 3 additional steps, okay, rule against perpetuities. I'm eliminating those last few steps for the exam because you don't need to know enough in detail for that, okay? So let's try number 31, which is another one. Amanda, you want to read 31, please?
He divides the property to my grandchildren, who is 21. He leaves 2 grandchildren, 2 children, and 3 grandchildren under 21.
Okay, just stop there for a second, okay? So here we have a situation where T, right, gives property to my grandchildren reach 21, okay? T has already 2 kids, and T has 3 grandchildren, okay? What you have to remember is at any given point, people can have more children. I know that sounds very obvious and stupid, but at any given point, anyone can have children. T can have more kids. C and D, I'm sorry, the children can have more kids, and the grandkids can have more kids. Okay? So this says very specifically, to my grandchildren who reach 21. This is not naming a specific grandchild. Okay? And you have to be very precise about this. This is saying to my grandchildren who reach 21. Okay? So Amanda, what do you think here will be the correct validating life? Who is responsible for creating grandchildren?
The adult.
Yes. Very specifically, in order for T to get grandchildren, again, if you don't know this, talk to me after class, in order for T to have grandchildren, her kids have to have kids. Right? We're not talking about adoption or anything else. In order for T to have grandchildren, her kids have to have kids. At the time of this grant, the only children she knows of are these two. Sure, there might be others who were born later, but we're going to limit our validating life to those in existence, lives in being, right? So our lives in being are the joint lives of the two children. In other words, whichever child lives longer. We say, actually, that the validating life is, quote, the survivor of T's two children, whichever one lives longer. Because as long as those children are alive, they can pop out more grandkids, right? So here, Amanda, is it certain that these children will make grandkids to reach the age of 21 within 21 years of their death? This is the same as before. Can a dead person have kids? Okay. So as long as at least one of the children's alive, can they pop out grandkids? And will that child reach the age of 21 within 21 years of their parent's death? Yeah, it's either yes or no. No, maybe, right? Don't call me maybe, right? Either yes or no. As long as one of those children is alive and they have a kid, that kid will either turn 21 or not within the appropriate period. There's no in between. You don't stop aging. Right? No Benjamin Buttons, nothing like that, right? Yeah.
In this scenario, would they need to, the grandchildren, they would just need to turn 21 within 21 years
Of the death of their parent.
Gotcha.
Right. So the grandkids need to turn 21 the grandkids need to turn 21 within 21 years of the death of their parent. Right. This says it in a much more coherent manner than I just did. It says all of T's grandchildren must reach 21, if at all, within 21 years after the death of their parents. And of course, if you're born to a parent, you will reach 21 within 21 years of your birth. Even if the death comes the next day, you're still good. People who are dead can't have babies. I'm going to keep repeating that because it's actually a surprisingly difficult concept to actually internalize. I know it sounds stupid, but it's actually trickier when you get these other examples. All right. Everyone okay with example 31? All right, Justin, take a look at example 32, please. Just read the read the grant, and we'll take this one step at a time.
He devises a sum in trust for A for life.
Uh-huh.
And A's children for life, the survivor of them. But upon the death of the last surviving child of A, to A's grandchildren at the time of T's death. A is an 80-year-old woman with 2 living children, B and C.
Okay, stop right there. Don't cheat and read the answer. Try to at least act surprised, maybe. Okay. I'm sure you've all read the answer, but we'll walk through it. Okay, so another principle that will be burned in your mind, I think I mentioned this in the last class. No matter how old you are, you can have babies. This is what we often call the fertile octogenarian, right? An 80-year-old woman is capable of having a child. Biologically, that's basically impossible. But under property law, we presume that any person who's alive can have children. The opposite of the fertile octogenarian is actually disturbing. It's often called the precocious toddler. And it's assumed that a child, no matter how young, can have a baby. I Googled this. So the Guinness record for the youngest mother is actually 5 years old. Yeah, I think I linked to it. I forgot if I did. If anyone Googles it, you can find it. Yeah, here it is. The youngest mother in record's 5 years old. That's pretty messed up, and for a lot of reasons. But property law presumes that basically an infant, a newborn baby, can have a child. Okay? Why is this important? Because so long as someone can have a child, I hope this is fake, but I verify this in a few spots, right? As long as someone can have a child, that extends the life and being. Yeah, that's the mother with the child. Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping that's fake, but it seems pretty. I verified in a few spots, but if you find it's fake, please tell me. I presume most things I read on the internet are fake until I see otherwise. But that usually is a good plan. All right, so let's go back to the example. So it says, T gives something in trust for A for life, then to A's children for the life of the survivor of them. Then, upon the death of the last surviving child of A, to A's grandchildren. All right, Judson, so let's just classify the estates here, right? A for life, what's that? Okay, then it says, then to A's children for the life of the survivor of them. What do we call that?
It sure seems like it's a life estate because they're only getting
Whoa, but it comes after life estate. What do we? Okay, it's a remainder, but what kind of remainder? Think about this very carefully.
So are A children ascertained?
Yeah, we have B and C. Is there a condition precedent? Ooh. What's this basis of the survivor of them? What's that saying? Is that if B survives C or if C survives B? Haven't we done that one a number of times? What's that called? No. Where is it with the commas? Is it before or after a comma? No. A for life, right? Comma. Then to A's children for the life of the survivor of them. Is there any break in that clause?
No.
So what kind of condition is that? Ravi?
Condition precedent.
And if it's a condition precedent, what kind of remainder is that?
Condition precedent, it is a contingent.
Yes. Okay, good. Yeah, tag team, right? So we know that that is a contingent remainder, right? All right. Okay, but then we have another one, right? Then upon the death of the last surviving child to A, grandchildren. Rob, what do you think that is? Well, on what condition do the grandchildren take it?
Oh, last surviving child, so without the condition.
Is it subsequent or precedent? Precedent.
Would be another, oh, so there's doctrine.
Yes. Remember that rule I told you, right? You always have alternate contingent remainders, right? They double up. Invariably, when you have one contingent remainder, the one after it's also making contingent, right? I put Judson and Robbie through the paces, right? But if you remember that rule, you can basically just, yeah. Good job, guys. Right, so I put them through the paces, but if you remember that rule, when you have a life estate with one contingent remainder, like 99% of the time, the second one will also be contingent. All right, everyone see that? So once we know that we have contingent remainders, we say, okay, wrap time, right? Rule against perpetuities. Okay. Okay. So let's focus on each contingent remainder separately because we have to. Okay. So Gary, let's look at the first one, right? It says to A for life, then to A's children for the life of them, survivor of them, right? Who are the children who are alive now? At the time of this grant, who are the children that are alive? No, they're not children. They're T's children, right? B and C. Okay. Let's just focus on B and C for a second. Is it certain to happen or not, right, that B and C will, like this. B and C are lives and being, right? Is there any debate over that? Okay. So really, the rule against perpetuities doesn't really matter for them because B and C are alive. But Gary, does it say then to B and C, or does it say to A's children? Who are going to be A's children? Do we know? Is that a class that's complete? Okay, and this is where the fertile octogenarian comes in. A may have a child at any point, right? A may have a child at any point. So even though the children right now are B and C, right? Say both of those children die, and then A has another kid. The surviving child, let's just call him X, right? Surviving child will now be X. So this 80-year-old matriarch outlives both of her kids, and then L'chaim, right? She has another kid, right? Pops one out. At that point, that surviving child would now have a life estate. X is the life estate. So everyone see that. So this first interest, then to A's children for the life of the survivor of them, that's going to be valid under the rule against perpetuities, right? There's no problem with that. Because without a doubt, X will reach 21 years within 21 years of the death of the mother. In other words, if the mother gives birth on her 81st birthday and then dies the next day, that child X will certainly reach 21 within 21 years of the mother's death. There's no dispute about that. Everyone see that? Where it gets messy, though, is the last one. It says, then upon the death of the last surviving child of A to A's grandchildren, right? Who are A's grandchildren? Okay. We won't know who all of A's grandchildren are until X. So let's walk through this, right? Let's say A has child X on her 80th birthday, right? On her birthday cake, and then she dies the next day, right? At some point, Y is a grandchild who will be born. But what if Y is not born for another 30 years? Right? What if X kid is not born for another 30 years? That won't work. Because now we're going beyond life and being plus 21 years. Right? X was not yet born when this was drafted. X was born at some point later, right? You are now going beyond 21 years of anyone who's alive when this was drafted. X cannot be your validating life because X was not in existence at the time this was drafted. Let me say this again. When you make this grant, we say who's alive today. The only people who are alive today were C and D. If X is born later, X can't be considered a validating life. Right? So effectively, you can't use X. You can only use A, C, or D. If this grandchild Y is born at some distant point in the future beyond 21 years, It violates the rule against perpetuities. So you actually strike out the remainder. Because there's a chance that it won't vest within life and being plus 21 years, you just invalidate the entirety of the remainder. I know. Oh, I'll explain this one more time. And if you have questions, I can help guide you. This is not at all straightforward. When this was written, in trust for A for life, then to A's children for the life of the survivor of them, then upon the death of the last surviving child of A, to the grandchildren. We need to find our measuring life. And a measuring life can only be someone who's alive at this point. Who is alive at this point? Oh, A is alive, C is alive. I'm sorry, A, B, and C are alive, right? Those are the only people who are alive. Any future interest must vest, if at all, within 21 years of the death of one of those people, right? We say that A is 80 years old and she has a baby, right? This new child, X, did not exist when this property was granted. Because X didn't exist at the time, X cannot be a validating life. So even though X's child will come to exist, X's child will come to existence within 21 years of X, that's not the relevant measure. You'd have to come into existence within 21 years of someone else, A, B, or C. Because that might not happen, because the child might turn 21, a couple decades later. Y was also a late bloomer, right? Or X was also a late bloomer. You strike the entire interest, it's void.
So validating life has to be,
Yes.
has to be in being
Yes.
at the time the initial stuff starts.
That's what life and being means. Life and being means someone in existence when this is written. You can't use a validating life for someone who hasn't been born yet. And what makes this annoyingly complicated is at any point someone else can be born that might take some interest, but it's not a validating life. Yes?
So the validating life that we choose is just the best person helps us prove that there can be a validating life at some time, right? Because it just seems like we're arbitrarily picking somebody who's alive at the time that'll help us prove that the rule against perpetuity won't kill the state.
More or less, you're on the right track. I mean, it's not that simple, but you have to find someone who is in being and can be used as a validating life for the future estate. And in this case, we're looking at the kids, B and C. And because new kids can be added to that, it's a policy that might not happen until much later. All right, I'm going to move on from this question, but I would strongly encourage you to go back and read this entire paragraph like 5 times if you want to get this. And I think it'll eventually will settle and click in. It's not straightforward, but it will eventually click. All right, let's try this some problems. Don't worry about the class gifts. I mean, I realize nothing's actually being tested on, but don't worry too much about that. Let's do some examples. Okay, there's some of these problems and notes on page 312, and let's walk through them. Okay. All right, Summer, can you read this question number 1 at the bottom of the page, please? Okay, thank you. So let's just classify our states, right? A has, okay, what about B? Yes, exactly right. So B has contingent remainder. If you know this contingent remainder, you have to raise your red flags and say, okay, what about the rule against perpetuities, right? We know that B is now 2 years old, okay? Who is our measuring life? That's right. Why is A not the measuring life? Really close. The reason why A is not the measuring life because he has a life estate, right? We're only really concerned what happens after A dies. So invariably, and this is not always the case, which is why I kind of ducked your question, the remainder man, right, will be the measuring life. Not always, but generally speaking, that's a good guess, right? One of the remainder men will be the measuring life. All right? So, Summer, it's almost a trick question. If B is the measuring life, right, is it guaranteed that B will obtain the age of 30 within B's life, plus 21 years? Say it again. Is it certain that within B's life, plus 21 years, B will turn 30? Of course, right? If B is a validating life, if B is a measuring life, one of the two things will happen. Either he'll die or he'll turn 21. And that will certainly happen within B's life plus 21 years. It's a silly thing, of course, right? If B is the measuring life, of course he'll hit 21 within, of course he'll hit 30 within 21 years, right? Don't get tripped up like, oh, 30 years, that's older than 21. That means it's void. Like, don't get tripped up like that, okay? All right, Rhiannon, want to take a look at question number 2, please? And just the first sentence. We'll do the second sentence in a minute.
O conveys A for life, A's children for their lives, then to B if B has been alive, and if B has not been alive, to B's heirs.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is several remainders are going to be stacked on top of another. So let's just classify these states, okay? So A has, okay. We assume here now that A has no kids, right? What comes after that? What comes after? What's the future interest after life estate? What kind of remainder? Right? Well, no one's ascertained even. So it's a contingent remainder, right? So the first one, life estate. Then the A's children have a contingent life estate, a contingent remainder in life estate, okay? And then it says then to B if B is alive, and if not, then to B's heirs. If we have one contingent remainder, what's the one that comes after it? Yeah, you can do the sweating work with Gary and with Ravi, but we'll just assume now the rule applies. When you have one contingent remainder, it's going to be followed by another contingent remainder, okay? Good. So we know that since we have contingent remainders, the rule against perpetuities is in the ballpark. It's something flagging up, right? All right, so Rhiannon, let me ask you this question. Who do you think our measuring life is going to be?
Well, if someone will not choose A.
That's right.
A's children, but since A's children are not alive,
Good.
it can't be the measuring life.
So who is it?
Well, is B alive?
Do we know if B's alive?
We don't know.
Well, how do we? We do know that.
Because he names it.
Yes, exactly. If someone is named, they are alive at that moment, right? If someone is named, they are alive at that moment. They may die tomorrow, right? But if they were already dead, you can't leave them property. You say to B's heirs. The fact that B is named means they are alive. So in this question, B has to be our measuring life. B has to be our validating life, right? All right, well, good. So Ashley, so next, right? So it says to A for life, all right, then to A's children for their lives. Okay, so that much is fine, right? Then to B if B is then alive, and if B is not alive, to B's heirs. Okay? So let's focus first. Okay, so we already said this first one is valid. Then to A's children for their lives, because that's certain to happen within 21 years of A's death, right? There's no dispute that when A dies, her set of children will be fixed, right? And those children will be in existence, so they can get it for their lives. That will certainly vest. What about the remainder to B? Is that certain to vest or not within the measuring life?
After A's children die?
Yes.
within 21 years?
Who's our measuring life again?
B.
Is it certain that B will be alive within his life? Yes. I know this sounds silly, but trust me, this is important. There's a certainty that B will be alive within B's life, or B will not be alive within B's life. It will definitely happen one way or the other. If B is the measuring life, it's a certainty that this condition will either vest or not. Either B will be alive or not. There's no dispute. So as a result, this will be valid under the rule against perpetuities. Everyone see that? Okay. You want to read number 3, please, Troy? Not me.
Declares the chief will do $1,000 for all members of the property class that are admitted to the bar.
Okay, so presumably, you're all, I'll pretend this is me for a second, right? You're all my students. Are all of you alive? Not all of you perhaps are awake, but I assume all of you are alive, right? So Troy, who would be the measuring live, or probably lives in this class? The entire class, right? To my members, plural class, so everyone here, right? Everyone here will either be admitted to the bar while you're alive or not be admitted to the bar while you're alive. Hopefully the former, right? No one will be admitted to the bar after they die. Although that actually has happened. There were actually a number of women who applied to the bars in the 1800s and they were denied, and they're actually admitted posthumously. So actually this would be a really weird wrinkle on this, but I'll leave that aside for now. Her name was it Bella Lockwood, or I can't remember. I think it was Bella Lockwood or something like that. Anyway, but let's assume under normal circumstances, you need to take the bar while you're alive. You cannot sit for the bar when you're dead. You cannot pass the bar when you're dead. Okay. All right. So Meredith, I want you to read, please, the next sentence. Right. The second suppose.
Suppose that
So it says here, suppose that O had said, I will give $1,000 for the first child of A who's admitted to the bar. Okay? Who's our measuring life here? Do we know who that child is? How do we know we don't know who that child is? Yes. This is the part which is tricky to get. The first child of A is not named, right? Who is named? Okay, so A is our measuring life, right? Is it certain that A's first child will pass the bar within 21 years of A's life? The answer is no. Why not? How old are all of you? Older than 21? I think so, right. What happens if A is a first child tomorrow, dies, and the kid sucks at law school and takes 6 times to pass the bar, doesn't pass the bar until he's 30, right? Then it's life and being plus 21, fail. So under the rule against perpetuities, this transaction is void. What if A's children never pass the bar? Never pass the bar. Void.
So if A does have a child at the time, and that child is named, then
That'd be
that
different.
child's-
That would be the measuring life.
Yeah. Okay.
So if A already has a first child and that person's named, that child will be the measuring life.
But if he isn't named, but A still has a child. So let's say A has like an 8-year-old.
Well, then that person will be life and being. The example here.
Would be life and being, even though it's not named.
Well, so specifically it says first child, right? You're going to name your child. You never have a second first child, right? There's only one first child. If your child dies, you have another one, that's not going to be your first child. So if you had wanted to say my first child, Joe, you say for my first child, Joe, right? You're naming a life and being. As this example is written, it's presumed that this child doesn't exist. Good named. Okay, so this gift would be void under wrap. All right, let's try. I want to get that one.
I guess
Calvin, yeah?
Would it be void anyway just because it has a condition other than living?
No, you can make whatever condition you want.
All right, so it's not just that he has to pass the bar. He could do that 30 years later,
Exactly.
but it would be possible.
Right. So imagine let's take a loose example, right? If the child was already in existence, the child was already 8 years old, and he passed the bar at the age of 25, that would be possible or not. So that actually would be a valid condition. All right. Can you read, please, Adriana, number 4, please?
O conveys to O for life, then to A's children age 25. A is alive and the child is 26 living.
Okay. So again, so it says O conveys to A for life. Okay. So what's A's interest there? last life estate, and then to A's children who reach 25. How would we characterize that future interest, please? Are they named? Who's getting it? Well, what word is used? Children. Is that naming one? No. A's children is a class. All right. A's children is a group of people who may be born now, some may be born at some point in the future, right? So when you say to A's children, are these ascertained? The answer is no. So what kind of remainder is it? It's contingent for two reasons. One, there's a condition precedent, so you have to hit 25. And also, these are unascertained heirs. So, I mean, it has to be contingent precedent, right? So it says to A for life, then to A's children reach 25. So A has one child, B, right, who's 26. Okay, so this one's actually a little tricky, Adriana. Who's our validating life here? Well, a validating life has to be a life in being. It has to be someone who's in existence. So, okay, that's right. This is one of those weird cases where the person who holds a life estate is the validating life, right? And the reason why is because A creates children, right? Sounds stupid, but we need to know who are these kids living to the age of 25. The person who creates these children is A. So B is not the validating life. Don't be tempted by that, right? So there's no hard and fast rules here, right? A is the validating life. Okay. So what happens? I'll move on to Samantha. What happens if B gets into a horrible car accident and dies, right? On Tuesday, A gives birth. And then on Wednesday, A dies. Will that new child reach the age of 25 within 21 years? The answer is no. How come? Exactly. Because A can have a child at any time. If A gives birth and then dies the next day, that child will not reach 25. So even though one of the children, B, may still be alive, one of the other children will not. And because the gift is void as to one of them, the entire remainder is struck, and you strike it out. So it's just O to A for life, period. And once A dies, O gets reversion. Because the children are not ascertained. No. You're I'm talking about purpose of the rule against perpetuities, not for contingent remainders. For the rules of contingent remainders, the same as it was last week. You have to have ascertained all of them, right? And you need to have condition precedent. There's a condition precedent reaching 25, and not all of children's are ascertained because they may have more in the future. So this is a contingent remainder. That's separate from asking about the rule against perpetuities. Because it may fail as to one, it fails as the entire class. These are two separate concepts. Determining contingent remainders and determining rule against perpetuities. These are not the same rules. Does that make sense? I see Ashley nodding. I'll see you nodding. Well, who? But it says children. Children's plural. There may be more children born, so the class is open. It's not vested. Because, first of all, there's a condition precedent. Well, also, they're not all ascertained. Listen, the difference between a contingent remainder and a vested remainder subject to open is very subtle. But here, the fact that it's a condition precedent makes it much more clearly a contingent remainder. Yeah.
What if it had said, to A for life, then to like, a child of A who reaches 25? Like, it doesn't say children.
A child, any child.
Yes.
Well, if it said any child, that'd be a different situation.
I know, that's what I'm.
So if it said to any child who reaches 25, I mean, that would still be contingent remainder because it's a condition precedent, but that will be okay under the rule against perpetuities.
Because B's alive.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is an example. So say if instead of saying to A's children, to any child of A, right? Let's say that was an example. To any child of A, pretend it said that. Okay. In that situation, it would still be contingent, but under wrap, it will be okay. Because B has already reached 25. The fact it says children and it's plural makes it invalid under wrap.
What would it have to say for B to be the validating life? How would that?
It wouldn't in this case because you're worried about children being created, and B can't create children of A unless he has sex with his mother, in which case we're in trouble in that case.
I'm confused about how a person who is alive during the time the document is drafted, which is that B in this case?
B is alive, yes.
And so I don't understand why B couldn't be. Yeah.
So the thing about validating life is there's no hard and fast rule, right? It's not always the remainder. You have to look at what's going on here. And in this case, the grant is based on A creating new children. So A actually becomes a validating life because A is one who has to create new children. It's very context specific, and this is why I resisted Brian's question a little bit, right? There's no one way of defining what a validating life is. You need to just do examples. All right. Other questions?
Then you say it has to be a pure vested remainder.
If it's pure vested remainder, wrap does not apply.
Right. So if it's a contingent at any point.
If it's a vested remainder subject to open, then wrap applies. If it's a vested remainder subject to divestment, wrap applies. So only pure vested remainders, it does not apply. Questions on this? All right. I'm going to stop here. I think you've done enough examples. I think I frazzled your brains enough. If you have questions, you can ask me about it later. Again, this isn't on the test, but you will need this for the bar. So have a great day, everyone, and I will see you next time.